I'm recording this, and I like the idea of making video journals, but I don't know, who knows, it's awkward when I like the idea and then all of a sudden I do it and I'm like, oh, I can't think of what to talk about, but I think I have something to talk about. I'm thinking about tomorrow, I'm preparing for the day, and I've got recent stressful stuff on the mind and, plans to deal with it, and the biggest one that's come to my mind right now is dealing with moments where I feel like I'm being unreasonable or I'm being a bad person or something like that, where I feel like I've been confronted with a situation, there's a pressure or a demand to do something, and it's being exposed or revealed my negligence or incompetence or unreasonableness when it comes to dealing with this situation. And the biggest issue, or it comes out in its worst usually when I'm like when it relates to like how I'm interacting with people, or like this is a social situation where there's a demand and I don't think I can live up to it, and I feel like it's an unreasonable failure. And then in tandem with that is the idea of like, okay, if I can't fail, or if I fail at this, it's only going to be worse for me. The situation is only going to get harder. If I can't handle this, if this is already overwhelming to me, this is only going to get worse, kind of thing. I'm only going to I'll either at worst have to deal with this later, or the issue is going to get bigger and it's going to be even harder to deal with, kind of thing. And that, when I'm in those moments, like most recently it came out where I was like, a manager was asking me to do something I hadn't done before, and it was sweeping the floor with a big floor sweeper, and I'd never used one before, and I felt incompetent and inefficient and very unconfident in my ability to do it right and reasonably. I was unsure about, like, when I'd seen other people do it, it seemed like they go the stretch of the room, they go from one side to the other and do it, but that didn't seem totally sensible to me, because I feel like you're going to lose a lot of your stuff on the way as you're like sweeping it. And I was, in my head over, okay, should I go from one side to the other? Does that make sense? Should I ask? And then the other thing with, like, in those unfamiliar situations where I ask a question, I always feel, or I frequently feel, like if I ask a question and they give me an answer, it's incredibly important that I like feel helped, or like I'm improved by the advice from that answer, because if not, I've just put myself in a worse situation where I'll look even more incompetent, because I just went for them I just made it so if anything I should do a better job. And if I don't even do a better job with more information, that's just showing how much more incompetent and unreasonable I am, kind of thing. To not know how to do something, ask for help with it, and then still fail, or, that is something that makes it feel a lot worse. And so that's where it's like, sometimes you want to live in that space of ignorance where it's like, oh, it's okay, you didn't know any better, and you didn't know better because you deliberately didn't ask for help, because you don't, if you ask for help and you don't get it, it's going to be even worse for you, because if anything, you should have gotten it more, but you still didn't get it, and so it's worse for you, kind of thing. It's like, you mishear someone while they're talking, and you're like, oh, wait, could you repeat that? Or, sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you say that again? And then they repeat themselves again, and you're like, oh, wait, I still didn't catch that. Now it's even worse if I ask for help. And the more you ask them to repeat themselves or re-clarify themselves, the worse you feel, the worse it gets, the more you feel like, oh no, I'm like being incompetent and unreasonable. I'm not getting what they're saying, even though they're like repeating themselves, kind of thing. I'm the problem here, kind of thing. I'm the one who's being unreasonable. That is what gets me into an overwhelmed place where I like feel all those negative physiological feelings of stress and overwhelm, and oh my gosh, this is going to get worse and I can't handle this. It's only going to get worse. And in that it's a very uncomfortable space, and dealing with that, handling that in the moment where I can get back to a functioning place is often awkward. Um, you know, how do I go from being overwhelmed by something, feeling like I don't understand how to do it, and I don't, I don't, I'm not confident in getting help either. Um, Going from that to like trusting myself, being confident, being okay with however it goes, just going about it the best I can and not worrying about whether I do it right or wrong. I want to do a good job, or I want to do it as best as I can, but if I can't get it, it is what it is, and don't worry about, what happens next or the consequences or the implications even. That's not your, I don't know. It's not, it seems like, well, the bottom line is it does more harm than good to worry about that stuff, but I feel like there's a deeper truth that makes it so, even deep down, I don't have to worry about it, but I don't have an answer for that right now. But as far as like what I've come to, as far as like how to help myself the best way I can when I find myself in that situation where I'm confronted with something where I feel like I'm being unreasonable, I'm being asked to do something, and I feel like I can't perform reasonably. I feel like I'm being incompetent or whatever. When I find myself in that situation, what I've told myself as far as like how to handle it as best as possible is recognizing that now there's so many different truths and insights I feel like I've developed that I tell myself and I repeat to myself that, could be whole other videos or whatever, but I've already, so this is different stuff I've established with myself that seems to be helpful. But one of the big truths is like, don't get caught up in the idea of the consequences of things. Like, to be more concerned about things going right or correctly, that's what leaves you trapped and stuck and overwhelmed and in a fearful, negative place where you're not functioning very well because you're not trusting yourself. You're always insecure. You're always uncertain. You're always questioning whether it's okay because it has to go right. If it doesn't go right, that's bad. That can only be bad. And that's, yeah. So when I find myself in that overwhelmed space of like, oh no, I feel like I'm doing this poorly and unreasonably. That unreasonable part is interesting because it's like, okay, what is reasonable? I think it's unreasonable because I feel like a common, typical person would be given this job and be able to handle it. If you were to handpick an average person who's my age and my demographic or whatever, they would be able to handle this kind of thing. Or, that is what makes it seem like I'm being unreasonable. And the idea of being unreasonable is like, I'm being exposed as someone worthy of contempt, or like someone, once they see this quality of me revealed and exposed in my inadequacy, in my failure to live up to the expectation. Excuse me. I hope that burp wasn't obnoxious because I kept it in, but it still came out pretty good. But, once they see that part of me, it's this idea of like, it's a similar idea of, oh, they see this like thing that is not trustworthy, or like, it's a very similar reaction you would have to seeing someone behave badly or contemptuously. Like if you're hanging out with your best friend and all of a sudden you find out they're a racist, or they say something racist, or they do something that makes them seem like a very entitled in a rude way, or they act out very rudely or obnoxiously, or just like they do something, that makes them seem like the kind of person that you're like, oh, I don't like this kind of person. Like, this is a kind of person I'm seeing that they are because this is how they respond to this situation. And I don't want to be with a person who responds this way, kind of thing. And that is what I feel is being revealed when I am confronted with something that it seems like I should be able to handle it and I can't handle it, kind of thing. Or it seems like the kind of thing a reasonable person would be able to handle and I can't handle it. That is what I'm fearing and feeling overwhelmed by. The implications of, I can't handle this. Where does that leave me in their eyes? Not a good place. Either, they're going to distrust me. They're going to want to, abandon me, if not outright, like, scold or harm or reprimand or make my situation worse in some way. Most people probably aren't going to aggress against you. Though I don't know, certainly can happen when you're working on a team or whatever. But as far as like, yeah, mostly it's just a sense of, oh no, maybe abandonment. Maybe that is the best way to describe it. Just the fear of, oh no, I am not worthy of the tribe. They're not going to accept me. Once the tribe sees me like this, they're going to want to kick me out. This is not something a tribe would want to have in their group. Someone who can't do this. And so that is where that sense of unreasonableness comes from, I think. And as far as like, okay, how do I deal with that sense of overwhelm? This is bad. I'm unreasonable in their eyes. That idea. I think I can't, I don't want to, where I'm at right now, I don't want to make it about, oh, I'm probably still reasonable in their eyes, or, oh, I can, even if I can't do this, I still have other positive qualities. I don't want to make it about that. I don't want to like base my okayness based on, how they feel about me, or, that just feels so like, that doesn't address the problem of there is a bar, there is a point where, if they see me a certain way, it's going to be bad. I'm still keeping that idea in mind if I make it about whether I'm considered reasonable or not in their eyes. And so that's why I don't want to make it about that. I do want to make it about like my relationship with it. And like, how do I be okay with it no matter what, I guess. And so that's where I make it like, I can't control other people. Well, I guess first I start off with like, okay. Because I think part of it is like, I'm seeing myself as someone who's unreasonable. If I imagine myself from their eyes, and I would look at me being inadequate in this area and be like, oof, why can't you do this? I have contempt for you because you can't do this, this is a negative quality that I don't like, I'm keeping this in mind about you, and it's something that has, put you lower on the rung, or, I don't know, whatever, stuff like that. But like, I used to imagine like someone could only look at me this way, kind of thing. But I think a significant part of it is I'm looking at myself that way. I must be considering that I'm unreasonable, that, if I can't sweep this floor, if I can't perform this job a certain way, and I feel bad about it, I'm considering myself as unreasonable. And that is like, that realization, that idea is like, wait a second, how can I do that when I feel like everyone is, again, another video for another time, I guess. But like the idea that like everyone is, a victim of their circumstances, and everyone is just the culmination of, where they grew up, what they've seen and been exposed to, who raised them, what they've read and learned and seen, and what neural pathways they've built and stuff like that. And sure, yeah, there's some choices there's you make choices on what you do and stuff like that, but my perspective is, we are what we are significantly because of what we've seen and been exposed to, not because of like, I don't know, something that you should feel bad about. I think in the same, like, you shouldn't take it personally if you're bad or whatever. And it's only reasonable that you do what you do because of what you've been through. I don't look at people who are on drugs or homeless people or criminals or whatever with like, oh, this is a type of person, and they are, something like, I can't believe they do this. How could anyone do this? It's unreasonable that they do this. My outlook I try to have is like, it's only reasonable that people are the way that they are. If I was born into the environment and raised in the environment that they were and exposed to everything that they were, I would have come out just like them, exactly the same. Or, maybe there's some integral choices and, some happenstance or something like that makes the differences, but that's what it is. I don't think it's like, I don't know, something where you should feel bad about it. Like it was your, I don't know, something about, it's so weird because it like, I can consider that like, yes, choices are important, and yes, we all have personalities, but like, so what is it that I'm like seeing myself as far as like, what is the difference between I see myself as unreasonable and I see myself as reasonable, even though I'm doing the same thing? Like, but it's very clear and distinguishable whether I'm looking at myself as like an unreasonable person because I can't perform a job, or whether I'm looking at myself as reasonable because I could only perform the job the way I am doing it because of all that's led up to this point, all the information I have, the way I process things, the personality I have, the neural pathways I have, everything that's led up to this moment. It could only be sensible that I do this the way I do it. And I think maybe the difference is like I get caught up in this like social idea of what I should be. Maybe that's it. Like there's a social idea of what a good person is or what a reasonable person is. And if I'm not living up to that, or it's that fear of like, if I'm not living up to something that's safe or like, is considered good by others, that's when I consider myself unreasonable. If that's the lens that I'm looking at it through, or the perspective or whatever, that's what makes it so like painful and bad. Versus like, no, it's not about, being safe in society. It's about, judging myself by the existential standards of, hey, it's only reasonable the way I think that's what it is. If it makes any sense, like getting caught up in the idea of like evaluating myself based on how I think society would look at me, and like making that my personal perspective versus like my relationships to the world. I don't know anyone anything. No one knows anyone anything. I didn't ask to be here, all that, so yada yada. Like I am what I am because of everything that's happened to me, and it's only reasonable that I do this in the same way that everyone is, what they are because of what's happened to them. That's my belief. And those two different outlooks, I guess. But I am, in a very kind of significant way, disregarding my safety in society. I am choosing not to look at myself through a lens of, oh no, what's going to happen if people consider me as unreasonable, versus, like if I consider myself reasonable, but others consider me unreasonable, I'm choosing to look at myself as reasonable, even if others are choosing to look at me as unreasonable, kind of thing. That is the perspective, I guess. And that does a lot, I think, for, at the very least, maybe reducing shame. But, I think it does a significant thing otherwise of like, if I think I'm being reasonable, even if I'm not performing like a job well or whatever, like in the environment or culture that I'm in, there's an expectation that I should perform it a certain way or a certain level of competency. And if I can't meet that, that is, a failing. But it's like whether I look at that and be like, okay, it's only reasonable that I'm doing it this way, or, whether I look at that and be like, oh no, I failed and this is bad and people are going to consider me as bad and this is going to create a worse situation for myself. Oh no. Versus, yeah, like, and this isn't only one part of the equation, I guess, but the other side of like, so yeah, first, viewing myself as reasonable, choosing that perspective over, do other people consider me reasonable? Starting with this sense of, hey, I believe I'm reasonable right now. Even if I'm not performing this job well, I think it's only reasonable that I am performing it the way that I am. I'm doing my best. I want to do better, but don't get caught up in the idea of, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. I'm an unreasonable person because I can't do this. Don't get caught up in that, because that creates feelings of, I don't know, shame and overwhelm and unsafety, I guess. But it is also interesting because, like, if you're not performing a job well, that doesn't, change anything about the consequences. If you can't figure out how to pass your exam, there's going to be consequences. If you can't figure out how to, perform your job well enough, you're going to get fired. So there are consequences for doing things right and wrong, or meeting an expectation, a demand, a pressure, or whatever. And so that's the other side of it, of like, okay, I think I can believe I'm a reasonable person. I have to trust looking at myself that way more than trusting society's view. But also, then there's the threat and fear of consequences. If I don't perform this well enough, something bad is going to happen. There's going to be, pressure placed on me, that kind of thing. How do you deal with that? If I don't perform this job, something bad's going to happen to me. My situation is going to get harder, or, there are going to be consequences for me not able to do this right. How do you deal with that? And I guess that kind of ultimately goes back to, like, I don't know, maybe I'm still working on this part, but, like, you have to do your best and be okay with things not going right, or not being able to, get the outcome that you want. If you, like, just trusting that even if things fall through, even if you crash your car, even if you fail at the job, it's going to be okay. Not getting caught up in the idea of, like, the consequences, the pressure, the obligations. And, like, getting rid of obligations. You're never obligated to do anything. You can do whatever you want. You don't owe anyone anything. Everything is just a matter of circumstances and navigating material pressures. That's always the way I see it. Or that's the way I want to see it. Don't get caught up in the idea of, I'm obliged to do this, or I don't know, whatever. But, like, accepting that, getting back to that place of, okay, I could lose everything. I could lose my house. I could lose my job. I could lose whatever, yada, yada, yada. And, those could be the consequences. Trying not to get caught up in, like, if I don't have this, I won't be okay kind of thing. Trying to trust, like, just myself and life enough, and whatever could happen, whatever negative sensations, whatever material outcomes, trying to trust that whatever could happen, whatever consequences, it'll be okay. And that my okayness isn't based on my security of things, or what I have available to me, or what sensations I have, kind of thing. Trying not to get caught up in, like, if I fail, if there will be consequences, and those consequences affect me personally, and I can't be okay with losing certain things, or having more pressure or whatever. Like, trying to trust that even if I lost my house, I lost my car, I lost my money, if I ended up on the streets, or if I got sick, or if I got hurt, or whatever, like, trying to imagine having that life and having those sensations and being okay with that. Like, I can imagine what it's like, and I can trust that, like, I don't need what I have to be happy. I just need a certain state of mind or whatever to be happy, maybe, or content, or just okay. Anyways, I was hoping to make this more succinct. This is 22 minutes long, and I don't know even I totally covered it. Like, I still feel like I'm not totally explaining or justifying things to myself, or if I were to watch this in the future or whatever, I would, like, be totally appeased or whatever, because, like, being in that situation where you've lost your car is very different than just saying, like, oh, trust that would be okay if you've lost your car, or whatever. But there's something about that attitude of, like, being okay even with the consequences, trusting that even if you fail, it's not a matter of things going the right way and you will be okay, kind of thing. It's a matter of trust, whether you can trust yourself and doing your best job, and that's ultimately all it is, and that's the best that you can do. And then what happens will happen. You can do your best to get what you want, but you can't control what happens. You can't absolutely dictate it or whatever. I don't know, something about the illusion of control and whatnot or whatever. It's better to believe in yourself than worry about the consequences. I think that's the best way to get on and move forward and ultimately try to get what you want, kind of thing. I think that's the best way. Anyways, that's that. Who knows if I'll post this or whatever, but there we go.